Oh God.
Good morning. At least it's almost noon in Colorado.
I may not edit any of this out.
I'm not self-conscious.
Oh gosh. So I will start it off officially by saying, welcome to Real Talk with Eugene.
Thanks for having me, Eugene.
You're welcome, Amanda. I have Amanda Ganley.
Ganley.
Ganley on with Real Talk today. Just having a ball, as you can tell.
Just gonna take over.
Yeah. Like I said, this might be Real Talk with Eugene, but it's Amanda's show. So, but I do have a question for you, my dear friend.
Okay.
What is important for you now?
Okay. So I'm on the spot with that one. What is important for me right now?
And there could be a few things.
There's probably quite a few things. Yeah, I think I've been really mindful about deepening in my awareness and in my practice. So that has been some deepening in just self-awareness. I, gone down the rabbit hole a little bit with the Enneagram, which has been a great tool to just bring awareness around some of the subconscious things that I do, and like, oh, I do that thing that's typical of my Enneagram number, and I get to have some awareness around that and find peace around things and shift in the way that feels meaningful to me. So a growing awareness and just a deepening, right? Because that has allowed me to deepen in my relationship with life, and to be living in a way that feels really meaningful to me. So that's pretty high up on the list.
Yeah.
And I am talking about love and relationship with people a lot as my ministry. So that's also just it's really cool and really important to me to be able to connect with people, and because it gives me the opportunity to hear stories from people that I might not otherwise hear. Right. And when people learn that that's what my ministry is focused on right now, love and relationship, there's people always want to share something about those topics because they're endlessly interesting, and they're endlessly heart-opening, which has just been amazing for me and for the people that I'm lucky enough to interact with. So I'm sure there are more things. So we'll see what happens as we.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So love and relationship. So what drew you to that as a ministry? Because that's not just a hobby.
Right. Yeah. I think for a long time, authenticity was a really deep focus of my ministry. And I am polyamorous. And at some point, those things intersected where I just wanted to be really clear and really open about who I am in the world and how I'm living my life. So, so being able to talk about being polyamorous and recognize that love and relationship is a part of my spiritual practice, that all of these ways in which we find connection with other human beings it's such a valuable practice. And so all of the places that I was doing that, finding a meaningful connection, regardless of the label that I put on it, and wanting to talk about that in a really clear and open way with people, bred that, I believe. And now I get to talk about that with people all the time. And it's just so much fun because, it's love and relationship and sex. So I get to, talk to people about pleasure and orgasms as well. So, yay. And those are meaningful. And those are also just like meaningful and interesting and pertinent parts of our experience, right? People want to sort of separate out these things like love, relationship, sex, like they might be less than our spiritual side, right, when they are such a huge part of who we are as humans, and who we are as humans is who we are as spiritual beings. And so to separate these things out as something that are frivolous or less than, or that we should not be spending our energy thinking about or putting our love into, that deep centered divine love that shows up in these things that we're doing, in these ways that we're connecting with people.
Yeah. Yeah, very nicely said too. It's an interesting thing in the Western society, in Western civilization, an interesting word, that, love and sex and all of that, it's, as you had alluded to, it's separate, because we don't talk about that as much, right? And what I try to remind people whenever I get the chance to is that we're not only physical beings and emotional beings and mental beings and physical beings, but we are also sexual beings.
Right.
And that's a huge part of creation. not just creating, not just propagating the population or the species, but creative in all kinds of ways.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so important to our creative energy, right? To feel fulfilled in all areas of life. And sex is one of those ways that we experience fulfillment. And when we decide to just sort of shut that off, or want to talk about how, or not talk about it because it doesn't exist or it's not important, then we are shutting that off from our creative energy. And we all know that we're just such creative beings, and that, you know, everything that we are putting our energy into that gives us life, that brings us fulfillment, is helping us create the life that we want to be living. So yes, orgasm and pleasure and sex, those things are a part of this practice.
Yeah. Yeah. And when we shut that off, as you said, and it's not really, it may appear that people are shutting that part of themselves off, but it shows up negatively in other parts of their lives, in a lot of cases. So thank you for doing that work. And I can see why in this particular work that you've been called to. Not only have you been called, but you said yes to it. You know, picked up the phone. That there's a great calling for authenticity.
Yes.
You know, being that authentic self. You know, just to speak from your heart. You know, in this place too, there was something that I had to write down during the pray-in, that you had mentioned being in community. You know, and then during this little talk right here is about finding connection, which is the same. Being in community is finding connection, or finding connection is being in community. Why, Amanda, do you think that's important for the human species?
So that just reminded me of this David White quote that I keep sort of spewing everywhere that I go right now. It's like, you were here and I was here, and together we created a world. And I feel like everywhere that we're willing to do that, not just in an intimate relationship, but also in community, like anywhere that we're willing to recognize that there is another human being present here with us, and together we are creating a world, that world is filled with the love and the light of the divine. There is no place where God is not. So anywhere that we are willing to slow down, take a deep breath, and connect with that love and the light of the divine, recognize that we're creating something, that we're creating community, whether it's 2 people, whether it's 200 people. And the more willing that we are to be mindful and present to that, the more willing we are to be mindful and present to the divine, right? And that's how we have this relationship with life. That's how we remind ourselves that we are consciously creating our lives with spirit, by doing that, by being really present with it all the time. And other human beings are such a great opportunity to reflect and to be present and to be reminded of beauty and grace, and the divine in you is the divine in me.
Yeah, yeah. Willing to be mindful, and being a conscious creator,
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's huge, because, you know, it reminds me of when people say, you know, be careful of what you ask for. And usually I ask them, why is that? And they say, well, because you're going to get whatever your mind is on. So be careful of what you ask for. I say, well, if that's the case, and it is, then let's not be careful, because being careful adds a little bit of element of fear.
Right.
So let's be aware of what we ask for. And what I like about that is it brings us back to what you were saying, you know, being willing to be mindful about what we're creating with each other. Wow, Amanda Ganley, that's beautiful.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, that's why the focus of my coaching practice and in my podcast, like that's why it's so important to me that that's what we're doing. We're consciously doing relationship. We're consciously relating with one another so that we can consciously relate with our lives.
Right.
And be present to what it is we're creating, and create like what the absolute amazing things that we want, all of them.
Right. And we are in relationship all the time with everyone.
Yep.
You know, be it you and I, or maybe me and the person that works at the local store.
Yeah.
But we're in relationship all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And consciously creating together, you know, a world. And it took me a while, I have to admit, because there was that that phrase, right? A world that works for all, a world that works for everyone. And I had to admit during a video I did that it took me a while to put my heart around that saying, you know, a world that works for everybody because of the injustices that we can see and that we can experience. But then as I could continue to deepen into that, well, it doesn't work for everybody, you know, I'm like, well, is that where I want to put my focus?
Right.
You know, do I want to focus on what's not working? Well, no, I don't. Number one, it doesn't feel good, but more importantly, it doesn't help to create a world that works. If I say works for everybody, then that must mean that it works for me as well as you,
Right.
as well as the next person, as well as the next person. You know, and so that's a huge task, or
It is.
you know, and yeah. And I think the hugeness of it, or the task itself for me, is how can I show up authentically all the time?
Right.
You know, be it happy and joy or pissed off and just mad, but being my authentic self, you know. Yeah, so I can, you know, let me get rid of all of that so I can show up as that vessel of love,
Right.
you know, that you're ministering to folks about. You know, I
Well,
love that word.
and to be present, right? To be the, you know, whatever it is, and even if it's those moments where we're just like, life, right? It's like,
Right.
at least I'm present with this and willing to if acknowledge what it is. Because if I don't want to acknowledge that it exists to begin with, then I'm not going to be able to heal it. I'm not going to be able to work through it. And I'm not going to be able to create from a different place because I'm just like holding it down. But it doesn't mean that it's not here. It doesn't mean that it's not in the back of my head. It's still part of this creative process that I'm
Right.
in. So so be with it. Like be with the days that it's like, life, or, you know, yay, life. But when we're
Right.
really present to that thing, and when we're really present to even to that connection. So yeah, authenticity, that's why this is so huge, because really speaking from where we are in that moment helps us acknowledge where we're creating life from in
Yeah.
any moment.
Yeah. And, you know, trying to not be present with what's going on when life is going, "Argh," and I try to put it in the back or hide that or stuff it down. What's interesting that I just got, well, maybe anyway, is that we are still creating from, you know, that's playing a part of the creation.
Yeah.
You know, I may know I'm not going to look at that, but I'm not, if I'm not present to it, then I'm not really present totally to what it is that I want to create, because that's in the back of my mind.
Right.
Wow. Being present to it all. You
Yeah.
know, and isn't that ultimately self-love?
It is, right? If we can just accept who we are, where we are right now, then imagine what else we can accept, right? We can accept our partners, we can accept the person across the room who's getting on our nerves. If I can just be really present and pleasant to myself,
Right.
right? If I can be accepting and compassionate to me, then that is the only way that I'm going to be able to extend those gifts to the rest of the world.
Right. Yeah. What I like to say, what makes a gift is that we give it away. So if we are the gift, then we are here to give ourselves from a place of love, from a place of, you know, and when I say it from a place of love, I don't mean that wishy-washy love, you know, and that romantic love is a great thing. It feels great, and I'm speaking about a love that stands up.
Right.
You know, and I love that is the foundation of the authenticity.
Well, and I think what's really cool about what you said is that if we want to be able to give that gift away, we can't give someone something we don't possess. So if I want to give someone love, and that true deep love in whatever setting, whether it's a romantic love or any other way, then I have to first be willing to be that presence of that deep and abiding love. If I want to be peace, if I want to see world peace, then I need to be willing to embody and sit and be the presence of peace before I can give that gift away. And that's what's so important about this authenticity conversation, right? Because I have to first be willing to possess and be the gift that I want to give to anyone, because I cannot give from the lack and limitation, right? I cannot give from emptiness.
Right.
So when I am filled to overflowing as the presence of that deep and abiding love, that is when I am able to freely give it to the rest of the
Mm,
world.
mm, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. To be willing to be the peace and be willing to be love. You know, there's this old saying when I was living on the West Coast, working in, with some groups and stuff. And we would talk about, patience, asking for patience. Oh, you live on the West Coast. So, and you're going to know exactly what I'm referring to now. So will a lot of people who are watching this. So I ask for patience, and then I am finding myself at 3:00, 3:30 on the 405.
Getting all kinds of opportunities to be patient.
Right? Yeah. But to be willing, right? And then not be moved, even during all of that non-movement of the traffic, not be moved from the patience, because I stated my intention is to be willing to be patient, or to be willing to be at peace. Scripture speaks about, right? They said, so great master, what is the greatest commandments? And he said there are two, right? Yeshua Messiah said there are two: to love the Lord thy God with all that you have, but then also to love your neighbor as you love yourself. Love your neighbor as yourself. So how can I love my neighbor? And that doesn't mean the person that lives, not necessarily the person that lives next door, but what about that person that pushes my button?
Right. Exactly.
To love them as I love me. Woo-wee!
And if you're having a moment where you don't love you very much, then it is going to be infinitely harder to love even the person who is next to you, who is the sweetest person in the world, let alone the person across the room who's pushing your button.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, man, I'm so grateful. Even though you and I have talked, in the past a few times, this is my first time really getting a deeper insight to the work that you do.
Yeah.
And that's, even though and we can put all of these qualifiers on, God, that's huge work, but it's only about, that's the work that you're called to do it. There is no huge or small or big to it. That's just the work that you've said yes to, or why you have come here on this beautiful spiritual plane that we call Earth, hurling through the universe. Yeah.
There are days when it feels heavy and huge. And then but then there are other days where it's just like, yeah, this is it. Like, this is what I've come here to do. And life fulfilling, right? Like, life giving.
Yeah, it truly is. It truly is. I love that, because it's through that love, through that love and being present with self, that we get to create together. We get to, come together with other people to create a world of whatever it is that we have in mind to experience in that moment. I love the fact that we get to create moment by moment by moment. I love that. I love being an alumni of MSU, right, where we get to make this stuff up.
Right.
What a wonderful gift.
And to always be a choice, right? We always get to be a choice about what we're creating, right? We always have the opportunity to just take a step back, to take a deep breath, and to be present with all of the ways in which we are contributing to whatever it is that we're experiencing.
Right. And I always talk about, or I often talk about, that gift of choice, because it is a gift. It is a gift, and you've mentioned this word twice, to step back and take a deep breath.
Yeah.
That's so important. That's so very important, to connect with that breath, because it brings, if nothing else, it brings at least a moment of peace.
Right.
Yeah, because physiologically speaking, taking a deep breath signals the body to relax, right? I was doing some research. I teach a class called the Way of the Christ, and I use the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas by Tal Malachi, but I got into a different, wasn't a different translation so much, but the commentary was different. And one of the things that in the Aramaic tradition, what was so beautifully brought out is the first and the last thing that we possess, the first thing that we possess when we come into life, and the last thing that we possess when we leave life is the breath. You know, and which is, and when we sit back and think about that, you know, to step back and take a breath, because not only does the breath calm the body, but it oxygenates the blood, which feeds the organs and so forth and so on. And it also connects us with everything else. Yeah. You know, so love life to the fullest. Yeah. As one of my teachers used to say, to have this relationship with life so deep and meaningful that you experience every day a soulgasm, right?
Yeah.
You know, where it's like, bah! Yeah. But that's the energy of creation,
right?
Right?
It's spirit, right? Like, it's the divine energy that we're all walking around in. If we're willing to be present to it, like really truly present, to take a deep breath into it and be recognizing that we are it and it is us, there is no way not to be moved. There's no way not to be awed and to be soulgasming, right?
Yeah, right. Lisa Ferraro and Erika Luckett has a song called Gratitude and Awe. And there's a line, in fact, the hook is, if we're not in awe, we're not paying attention. You know, so going back to what you're saying, right, to be present, be present with everything, to be present with the emotions. Man, that is beautiful, because shit happens, you know? So,
all the time.
All the time, right?
All the time.
So let's be present to it, you know? Get to the point where you're going through stuff and you might be crying and you go, but this is really good because I know on the other side of this is freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
And the way that we transform it is to be present to it, right? Like, if I'm not paying attention to this thing that is happening, or if it's something that happens over and over again and I'm going, what, why? I've been on the phone with you going, why, Eugene, does this happen to me? and that's why, because I'm not paying attention. I'm not being conscious of how I am creating this thing. And so it shows up in similar ways over and over again. But when I'm willing to be present, when I'm willing to be conscious, that is the only way that I can begin to shift it so that it doesn't keep showing up the same way, right? That other thing that we like to say, change your thinking, change your life.
Right.
That's what this means. It means that you get to be really present and aware to how you are creating this thing, to then not be creating it the same way over and over if that's not what you want to be doing.
Right. Yeah. Tell a different story. Yeah. Isn't it amazing, Amanda, how quickly time flies?
Yes.
Because it's like, okay, that was 30 minutes.
I didn't completely take over.
No, not completely. Yeah. I think, anyway, never mind. So, Amanda, before we get off of this segment of Real Talk, what would you like people watching this to know? The wisdom, the wise words from Reverend Amanda Ganley.
Oh, I have a moment to throw in one last jewel of wisdom.
This is your moment to take over.
This is my moment to take over. So I will just share again that this is really the focus of my ministry and my work right now. So I am really loving coaching people around love and relationship and being in this practice of consciously creating relationship. And that does mean romantic relationship, but it means relationship of all kinds, right? Many of us want to be learning and deepening in our connections with other human beings, and that's relationship. And it's not just, that sort of love that we see in the Hollywood movies, but this deep abiding love, to really be present with it so that we can bring it into all of the aspects of our life and be relating to it in a new way. So so I'm loving doing that. And I have a podcast where I'm doing that called the Poly Priestess Podcast. And you can find that in all the cool places where the podcasts are. So, you know, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio. And you can find me on my website, polypriestess.com. And I have some speaking engagements also coming up on amandaganley.com. So there's my plug. I'm not sure that it's a whole shit ton of wisdom. Oops, I cursed. A whole ton of wisdom.
Yeah, but I curse first. So, but this is real talk. This is real talk.
That was my shit ton of wisdom for the afternoon. And yeah, no, and I love life, and I love helping people get the tools to love life this much, right? To be this exuberant and this excited about doing this thing called life, about doing these things called love and relationship, and being really present to the awe and the beauty and the grace that is here all the time if we just want to look around and be with it.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to, so it's polypriestess.com.
Yes.
And Amanda Ganley, Ganley.
Yes.
.com.
Yes.
Okay. So I'll make sure that that's up here, that people can connect with you. Cool.
Thank you very much. And it's the Poly Priestess Podcast. So all of those cool places.
So, okay. So that's polypriestess.com or polypriestesspodcast.com.
So if you are like on iTunes and you're just searching for a podcast, you can just type in the Poly Priestess Podcast.
Okay.
And you will see my face. I think I have blue hair in the picture, but you'll see this face.
Okay, good. Reverend Amanda Ganley, thank you so much for taking the time out this morning to be on Real Talk with me. I appreciate you. I always have from day one. And I know that we'll be speaking.
Yes. Thank you, Eugene. I had a blast. It's always fun to talk to you. So thanks.
Isn't this fun?
It's fun. Yeah, it's a good time.
Good. All right, my beautiful one. I'll see you soon, okay?
Great. Thanks.
Peace.